You've heard the stories, the myths, the whispers, the legends. They're out there. 7 creatures in the dark. The Chandrian. No one seems to agree on who or what they are. Even their origins vary from story to story. Are they the first people to refuse the path of Telu? Are they warriors cursed by Selitos during the sacking of Mir Tyranniel? Or are they fallen heroes wrongly betrayed throughout history? No matter the tale, one thing can be said with absolute certainty. There are always 7 of them. For it's part of their name, you see. In the ancient language of Temic, predating Tema by over 1,000 years, the word Chaen means 7. The name Chandrian, then, literally translates to 7 of them. But is Haliax, Lord of the 7, included in their ranks? Or does he stand apart, making 8? At times the books are ambiguous with this detail. In chapter 28 of The Name of the Wind, during the second part of Skarpi's story, when Selitos is talking to Alaf, Selitos refers to Lanre and his Chandrian. Later, when Skarpi is being arrested, he insults the justice by saying, "It's not as if I expect you to bound off looking for Haliax and the 7 yourself." When the 10th anniversary edition of The Name of the Wind came out, several riveting pieces of art were included in the book, together with this chilling piece by Dan Dos Santos. Looking at the image, we see Cinder standing in front of the other Chandrian as he approaches Kvothe with a twisted smile on his face. There has been some contention among fans about whether 2 of the shapes closest to the fire are hooded people or just smoke. Depending on what you see, there could be anywhere between 6 and 8 people in this picture. Only 3 of the Chandrian are described by Kvothe during the slaughter of his troop. Cinder, who is bone white except for his dark eyes, a bald man with a grey beard, and Haliax, who is wreathed in shadow. The description of Haliax is particularly important because as a demon whose face and body are blanketed by darkness, it could well be that the shape to the immediate left of the fire is in fact Haliax. Additionally, Kvothe tells us that Haliax sat apart from the rest, at the edge of the fire, which would indeed indicate that he is one of the 2 shapes at the back. Did Patrick Rothfuss instruct the artist to be vague about the Chandrian's number? Or were creative liberties taken? We can only guess as to how much input Rothfuss had whilst the image was being worked on, from its original concept, as shown here, to the more ambiguous final image. However, the Adem's poem about the Chandrian informs us that Haliax should be counted among the 7. Therefore, we can assume that the lines Haliax and the 7, and Lanre and his Chandrian can be interpreted like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Just because a group belongs to a leader doesn't mean that that leader is not part of the group. It just means that Haliax is distinct from the rest of the Chandrian in some way. But what were to happen if someone were to kill a Chandrian? They would no longer be 7 in number, which would make the name Chandrian rather redundant. If any of the Chandrian were to die in Book 3, I imagine it would be Cinder. After all, the books do seem to be foreshadowing a final confrontation between Kvothe and Cinder. Kvothe develops a fixation on Cinder due to the terrible things he did prior to killing his parents, as inferred by the Kvothe, who deliberately tells him that Cinder is the one he wants. Also, in Ademre, when Kvothe is speaking with Chaen about the Chandrian, she asks him whether he will meet such a being again, to which Kvothe replies yes, with a certainty in his voice which surprises him. Now let's imagine Kvothe succeeds in achieving his goal. He takes his revenge and kills Cinder, but now 7 have become 6, necessitating the need for another to fill in their ranks, to make up the difference. What if, in slaying Cinder, Kvothe becomes a Chandrian himself? This notion is somewhat supported very early on in The Name of the Wind, by what is presumed to be a nonsensical rumour from Chronicler. Some are saying that there is a new Chandrian, a fresh terror in the night. His hair is red as the blood he spills. Of course, Chronicler is only referring to Kvothe in a negative light in order to manipulate him into telling his story. The fact that it's easy to see this statement as nothing more than a metaphor could well be an intentional obfuscation. Rothfuss might very well be banking on the fact that people naturally want to interpret Chronicler's line as rhetoric, rather than anything to be taken seriously. But what's really interesting here is Kvothe's response. He doesn't retort with anger or disbelief, but something akin to a weary acceptance, saying the important people know the difference. It might be that Kvothe killed Cinder and is now in his place, so that the Chandrian are still 7 in number. The skin dancer who intrudes upon the Waystone Inn alludes to this as well. In fact, it appears to be looking for the Chandrian. While its intent towards them is unknown, it asks Kvothe 2 very important questions. After being injured, it looks towards Kvothe and asks, Te Afen Cephaloi, which people have speculated to mean that it's asking if he is one of the Scythe or the Amir. But then, it ominously says Te Rente, which is very close to the Adem word Rinta, Rinta being another word for Chandrian. Given that the word Te is a common word for you in Latin and Hungarian, when you piece it all together, the skin dancer appears to be asking Kvothe, are you a Chandrian? If it is mistaking Kvothe for one of them, its reasoning is unknown. Kvothe had done little to interact with the skin dancer at this point, other than to offer it a place to sleep and some food, but this may suggest that the number of Chandrian, or their membership at any rate, may not be as fixed as we are first led to believe. Also, consider the signs that mark the presence of the Chandrian. Each Chandrian has a sign associated with them. Cyphus bears the blue flame. Sturkis is in thrall of iron. Ferul, chill and dark of eye. Usnia lives in nothing but decay. Grey Dalsinti never speaks. Pale Alinta brings the blight. Last there is the Lord of the Seven. Hated, hopeless, sleepless, sane. Alaxel bears the shadow's hame. If Kvothe is destined to become one of the Chandrian, then his sign might be the silence that permeates everything that surrounds him as coat. It's inferred that each Chandrian's sign may be more of a curse for that person than the people around them. In this way, the signs are thematically appropriate punishments in connection to their respective bearers. For fair Lanre, who was much loved and respected for his valiant deeds among his people, it's quite fitting that his sign should be the shadow that clings to him, so as to serve as a constant reminder of what a monster he has turned into. In Kvothe's case, silence is torturous, because no music exists in silence. One of the worst curses for any musician would of course be this deep, resounding quiet. We are told that the silence belongs to Kvothe, that it is the silence of a man who is waiting to die. We don't know much about the Chandrian, but we do know they can't easily be killed. This is proven during the bandit's scene, when Cinder is struck by an arrow, and he removes it without showing any signs of physical harm. If Kvothe has indeed become a Chandrian, then the doors of death may be closed to him as well, the implication being that he can't be killed off by any conventional means. This adds a whole new layer to the patient cut flower sound of a man who is waiting to die line. Kvothe could be waiting for a very, very long time. As an additional point, let us consider that if Kvothe is now a Chandrian, then why isn't he roaming around with Haliax and the rest of his lot? Well, the answer to that question could lie with the thrice-locked chest in Kvothe's room. Perhaps Kvothe, in disagreeing with the Chandrian and their goals, sealed the majority of his power away in the chest so that he cannot be used by Haliax. This would explain why he's taken up residence far away, in a lonely corner of the world, to protect others, not just himself. Indeed, if the other popular theory about Selatos being the Kvothe turns out to be true, then this lines up quite nicely given that we are told Lanre spoke to the Kvothe before becoming Haliax. In Skarpi's story, Selatos was the one who cursed Haliax and his Chandrian with their signs, but what if that conversation Lanre had with Selatos was the very same conversation he had with the Kvothe? It leads to some interesting parallels between Kvothe and the Chandrian, that's for sure. Just like Lanre, Kvothe has also spoken to the Kvothe, therefore the stage is set for him to receive his own sign. We know that other members of the Chandrian have met the Kvothe too, in particular Cinder, who the Kvothe admits to having a grudge against. Now I know much of this is based on conjecture, but there are more parallels between Kvothe and the Chandrian that are worth raising in support of this theory. For one, both Kvothe and the Chandrian are shrouded in myth. Soon after his acceptance into the university, Kvothe began spreading rumours about himself that would grow into legend. By the time he tells Chronicler his story, patrons of the Waystone Inn are telling all sorts of tall tales about him. some with a semblance of truth, but many are exaggerated and false. There are people who think that he's only a myth and never really existed. As with the Chandrian, rumours and hearsay surround their every word and deed. There is also the slaughter of Kvothe's troop to consider. Who else do we know has wiped out an entire travelling troop, albeit a fake one, in cold blood? That's right, Kvothe. Personally, I'm on the fence as to whether Kvothe does in fact become one of the Chandrian. I think there is enough in the story already without needing a twist like this to happen, and there is plenty of evidence to the contrary. For example, Kvothe hums to himself accidentally at one point, before he forcibly stops himself, and he also flat out sings Tinka Tana, which leads him to being recognised by a drunk at the Waystone Inn. This would suggest that the absence of music is not his Chandrian sign, and that the science of 3 parts is more psychological in nature than anything else. Nevertheless, I find this theory interesting to warrant a discussion about it. Also, wouldn't it be poetic irony? The story of a man who literally becomes one of the monsters he's hunting. Anyway, let me know down in the comments what you think. Like, share and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and I'll see you next time.